They make a desert and call it peace. Tacitus. Picture this. A general stands triumphant, proclaiming peace, while behind him stretches a wasteland of conquered villages. His soldiers call it victory. The survivors call it annihilation. Two perspectives of the same moment, one celebrated in history, the other buried beneath it. The paradox that haunted Tacitus still echoes today. Those who destroy most completely claim the most noble achievement, peace. They silence opposition not through harmony, but through elimination. The absence of resistance becomes their definition of order. When does pacification become extermination? At what point does the silence of the conquered stop being peace and reveal itself as absence? How many voices must be silenced before we question whether what remains deserves to be called civilization? This is not merely ancient history. It is the blueprint of power that repeats through centuries. The victor's peace has always been built upon the silence of those who can no longer speak. The mechanism is psychological, a collective self-deception. By labeling destruction as necessary for peace, we transform moral horror into virtue. The mind cannot bear the weight of being the villain, so it rewrites the narrative. Tacitus understood this when he recorded the words of the Caledonian chieftain Calgacus. They create desolation and call it peace. He recognized that Rome's greatest self-deception was believing its own propaganda about bringing civilization to the barbarians. The empire's machinery runs on this contradiction, minting coins with the goddess of peace while waging endless wars. The cognitive dissonance isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Peace becomes the justification for violence, not its opposite. This pattern burrows into our collective consciousness. We begin to believe that destruction is necessary for creation, that before we build, we must first tear down. The desert becomes the blank canvas upon which we imagine our vision of civilization. The most insidious aspect is how thoroughly we erase what came before. Not content with physical conquest, empires rewrite memory itself. They don't just take territory, they take history, language, gods, and identity, leaving people orphaned in time. This is why Tacitus was revolutionary. He listened to the conquered. While other Roman historians glorified empire, he documented its cost. They make a desert and call it peace isn't just observation, it's accusation. The empire stands indicted by its own actions. Do you feel the weight of this revelation? The histories you learned, the maps you studied, the very definition of civilization you inherited, all might be built on this same deception. The peace you know may be someone else's desert. The neural pathways of justification run deep. Our brains are wired to justify our group's actions, to see our violence as necessary and theirs as barbaric. The amygdala activates differently when we consider us versus them, biology conspiring with ideology. This conditioning begins early. Children's stories about brave settlers taming wild frontiers, about the necessity of certain wars, about the inevitability of progress. By adulthood, the desert peace equation feels natural, unquestionable, almost invisible. The trap is nearly perfect. Those who benefit from the system control its narrative. Breaking free requires seeing through the peace desert illusion, recognizing that what we call stability may be built upon systematic erasure of alternatives. Here lies the radical shift. What if peace isn't the absence of visible conflict, but the presence of justice? What if true civilization isn't measured by monuments built, but by voices preserved? What if progress doesn't march in a straight line, but spirals, returning to wisdom we've forgotten? Throughout history, resistance has taken unexpected forms. Sometimes it's not the warrior, but the historian. Not the revolutionary, but the grandmother teaching forbidden languages. Not the army, but the community preserving what others would erase. Tacitus himself demonstrated this courage, a Roman critiquing Rome, a beneficiary of empire documenting its crimes. His writings weren't just historical record, but moral challenge. He forced his contemporaries to see the desert beneath their peace. The way forward isn't erasing history, but completing it, adding back the voices that were silenced. True peace doesn't require a desert first. It grows like a forest, diverse, interconnected, stronger for its differences, patient in its growth. You now stand at a crossroads of perception. Will you accept the peace desert equation as natural law? Or will you, like Tacitus, develop the courage to see beyond official narratives, to question whether what we call progress has come at too high a price? Here is the revelation that changes everything. Peace is not something imposed from above, but grown from below. It's not the silence after destruction, but the harmony of many voices. It's not a desert of uniformity, but a garden of difference. This understanding reframes every news headline, every history lesson, every justification for control. The desert makers always claim necessity. They always promise future gardens. Tacitus urges us to question, at what point does the means destroy the end? We inherit this wisdom across 2 millennia because one Roman refused to accept the comfortable lies of his time. His words reach through centuries to ask, what deserts are being created today in the name of peace? Whose voices are being silenced in the name of progress? The choice before you isn't whether to accept or reject history, but whether to see it completely. Desert and garden, peace and violence, monument and grave. True wisdom begins when we hold these contradictions honestly, without looking away. They make a desert and call it peace, has echoed through centuries because it names a pattern we keep repeating. Each generation must rediscover this truth, that the peace of silence is no peace at all, that true civilization preserves voices rather than silencing them. The final revelation is this: we are all simultaneously Rome and the conquered. We benefit from systems we didn't create while suffering under others. The wisdom of Tacitus isn't about assigning blame, but awakening responsibility. You carry this inheritance, the capacity to create both deserts and gardens. Every day you choose which stories to believe, which voices to amplify, which definitions of peace and progress to accept. These choices, multiplied across millions, shape the world. Tacitus whispers across time, beware those who promise peace through destruction. Question narratives that require silencing others. Remember that true civilization is measured not by the monuments of the powerful, but by how it treats the vulnerable. True peace isn't the silence of the conquered, but the harmony of the equal. Not the sterility of the desert, but the vibrant, complex ecosystem where many stories grow side by side. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. In the end, Tacitus offers not just criticism, but possibility, the chance to break the cycle, to build peace that doesn't require deserts first. His words survived because they name a truth we continually need to remember, that what we call peace matters as much as peace itself. Walk forward with this ancient wisdom newly awakened. See the deserts created in peace's name. Listen for silenced voices. Question comfortable narratives. Remember that true civilization is measured not by conquest, but by conversation. The desert makers still walk among us, still justify destruction as necessary for order. But now you see with Tacitus's eyes the ability to recognize when desolation masquerades as peace, when silence is mistaken for harmony. This awareness doesn't condemn us to cynicism, but invites us to creation, of histories that hold multiple truths, of systems that value many voices, of a peace worthy of the name because it grows from justice rather than imposition. Let Tacitus's warning echo. They make a desert and call it peace. Then ask yourself, what kind of peace will you make? What voices will you amplify? What histories will you tell? What future will you cultivate? Desert or garden? The cycle of desert making can end with you, not through conquest, but through recognition, not through imposition, but through invitation, not through silencing, but through listening. This is Tacitus's gift across millennia, the courage to see clearly and choose differently. 2,000 years later, his words still burn with truth. They make a desert and call it peace. The fact that we still need this warning proves its value. Each generation must relearn that true peace cannot be built on destruction. The desert or the garden, which will you cultivate? The silence of conquest or the harmony of justice? The peace of the powerful or the peace of the possible? Tacitus has shown you the choice. The rest is yours to make. Let this ancient wisdom guide your modern choices. When someone points to silence and calls it peace, remember Tacitus. When destruction is justified as necessary progress, question it. When history is simplified to comfort the powerful, complicate it. The revolutionary act is seeing clearly, recognizing deserts disguised as peace, silencing masked as order, conquest presented as progress. Tacitus's courage wasn't in opposing Rome, but in seeing it truthfully, in all its contradiction and complexity. This is your inheritance and your responsibility to see beyond the peace desert equation, to imagine alternatives, to build systems that don't require victims, to create histories that hold multiple truths, to cultivate gardens where deserts have been made. They make a desert and call it peace remains one of history's most powerful indictments, not just of Rome, but of all who confuse conquest with civilization, compliance with harmony, silence with peace. Its truth transcends its time. The final wisdom is this: true peace is not the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. Not the silence of the conquered, but the chorus of the free. Not the sterility of the desert, but the vibrant, complex harmony of the garden. Let Tacitus's warning echo through your choices. They make a desert and call it peace. Then choose differently. Create peace that deserves the name, rooted in justice, flowering in diversity, sustained not by force, but by mutual flourishing. The desert or the garden, which will you help create? The choice echoes through centuries, from Tacitus to you. His warning remains our challenge and our possibility to recognize false peace and cultivate true harmony. The rest is in your hands.